Hello, everyone. My name is Mudassar. I'm your host, and welcome to yet another TestMu session. We've got an exciting session ahead and set to transform the way we handle cross browser automation. Today, we've joined by Matthias from Google's Chrome browser automation team, who will guide us through the groundbreaking WebDriver BiDi. With significant advancements in the web technology, it's time for us to catch up with automation tools like WebDriver BiDi. With this, let's get started and explore how BiDi can revolutionize your automation strategy. Over to you, Matthias.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for the introduction, Mudasa. Right, without any further ado, I'll start sharing my screen, which you should now see. And well, just in my own words again, hi, I'm Matthias. As Mudasa said, I'm work as a developer relations engineer at Google with Chrome's tooling team. And together with all of you today, I want to bid farewell to cross-browser automation headaches. But since I grew tired of them, not with a dull corporate presentation, but a little story you'll hopefully enjoy. So welcome to a story from Chrome, bidding farewell to cross-browser automation headaches, starring Tommy. Well, Tommy is the small guy here on the left. Tommy is a browser automation engineer, just like some of you are. And yes, Tommy does not have only 3 fingers on his left and 4 fingers on his right hand, because I'm better at drawing, but because he's AI generated. Here's Tommy the other night. He had a headache trying to pick the best tool for cross-browser automation, which admittedly can be a challenge in today's tooling landscape. As in any other area of the web ecosystem, there are a lot of other evolving tools and solutions. Some with bigger backing, some with smaller, some paid, some free, some based on CDP, some on WebDriver, and some of the tools are even based on one another. What all of those tools have in common is that they need to interact with browsers in order to automate them. This interaction, this automation, doesn't work with magic spells like Tommy is trying to custom here, but protocols. The protocols used today are CDP, which is short for Chrome DevTools Protocol, and WebDriver. I'm sure some of you are familiar with them, but for those of you who aren't, let's do a quick recap. The Chrome DevTools protocol was, as the name suggests, initially designed and intended for Chrome DevTools to debug the browser's internals and make them accessible for developers. CDP runs on WebSockets. The Chrome DevTools protocol was never standardized, but also never meant to be. Nevertheless, Mozilla at one point partially implemented CDP in Firefox anyway. So Firefox would be able to be automated with the same tools as Chrome, like with Puppeteer, for example. Later on, CDP also became the foundation of Playwright. Also, CDP is a bidirectional protocol. This allows CDP-based tools to hook into browser events rather than polling and waiting for them to happen. Now, let's look into WebDriver, the other main protocol. WebDriver is a really major W3C standard with its roots dating back almost 20 years into the Selenium project. By now, it is implemented as a driver for every major browser. So there's Chrome driver, Gecko driver, Edge driver, and Safari driver. Over time, and by having its origin in the Selenium project, today there are language bindings for JavaScript, Python, Ruby, Java, and even C#, making it easy to adopt by any developer. Though with its age, WebDriver also has its problems. It cannot deal well, or sometimes at all, with newer browser features that rely on a deeper connection to the browser internals, like extensions. And being based on HTTP, it's also primarily unidirectional, responding to a send command, but never forwarding events. So to summarize, the Chrome DevTools protocol is not standardized, which allows it to quickly change and be extended, but on the other hand, also requires tools that use it, like Puppeteer, to be kept up to date with the protocol. And as we just heard, it's bi-directional, allowing it to receive events rather than waiting on them to happen. On the other side, there's WebDriver, an official major W3C standard that is supported by all browsers, but only unidirectional with a limited command set. As said, both protocols are widely used by tools in the ecosystem. For example, our very own Puppeteer originally was a reference implementation of a tool automating Chromium-based browsers and Firefox via CDP, the Chrome DevTools protocol. An idea that Playwright built upon and took 3 steps further by maintaining patches to add CDP support for other browsers than Chrome. And then, of course, there are all those tools, some of them around for ages, that have historically been based on WebDriver, like WebDriver.io, Selenium, Source Labs, BrowserStack, and Lambda Test. To be fair, over time, most of them also implemented features based on CDP in order to support more advanced automation use cases for the users in Chromium-based browsers at least. For example, Selenium started to support event-driven tests with version 4, also enabling those in downstream products like Lambda Test and BrowserStack. However, that led exactly to Tommy's headaches mentioned, because now, whenever he's setting up a test suite, he needs to ask himself, which tool allows me to test the most use cases on the widest browser palette? Today, for many, there is an obvious answer to this question. Playwright, of course, with its simple-to-use API and cross-browser support, can be a great choice. As you know, it's using the Chrome DevTools protocol to automate Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit, the same engine Safari is based on. This works because, as mentioned, Playwright is patching the Chrome DevTools protocol into the open source versions of the browsers that do not originally have it, specifically Firefox and WebKit. This can lead to challenges. For example, if Tommy wants to test something on an older version of Firefox, this would not work, because he cannot simply point Playwright to any Firefox binary in any version, but only the ones shipped with a specific Playwright version. So in some circumstances, the question still stands, which tool allows me to test the most use cases on the widest set of browsers? Something not just Tommy asked himself, but also we did, together with all other browser vendors like Mozilla, Microsoft, and Apple, but also tooling vendors like WebDriver.io, Selenium, Source Labs, BrowserStack, and Lambda Test. So a few years back, we sat together and thought about how to combine the strengths of both protocols that are used in today's ecosystem, the old and major WebDriver and the handy Chrome DevTools protocol. The result of this work is WebDriver BiDi, a new protocol to automate modern browsers with the same set of commands. WebDriver BiDi is specified as an open W3C standard, just like WebDriver was, and is widely backed, not just by browser vendors, but tooling vendors and individual contributors as well. Just like CDP, it's bidirectional. So you do not need to poll for events like with the old WebDriver, but can listen for them instead. Another great thing is WebDriver BiDi is designed for the modern web. It's meant to be extensible with new browser features able to be automated under the same spec. For example, currently, the standards group is working on adding spec support for prompts created by the Web Bluetooth API, an automation use case you could only dream about with the old WebDriver. What's amazing is that with this work happening in a standards body, rather than being a Chrome-only initiative, for example, with BiDi, there is an unmatched chance your automation runs in every browser to come without any changes. And last but not least, WebDriver BiDi brings the same granular, low-level control that CDP brought to Chromium before to other browsers as well. Up to this point, this might all have sounded fairly familiar. But if WebDriver BiDi is so amazing, why isn't everybody using it already? What's the catch? It's still work in progress, or rather it was, because there was a lot of movement in the ecosystem over the last few weeks. Let Tommy give you an update of what happened. For example, at the beginning of the month, BrowserStack launched support for WebDriver BiDi on their platform, setting on Selenium's increased WebDriver BiDi support. Only a week later, Firefox announced production-ready support for WebDriver BiDi from Firefox 129 and later. At the same time, we launched full Firefox support with Puppeteer based on WebDriver BiDi and production-ready BiDi support in Chrome 2. Note that this announcement also means that CDP support in Firefox is going to be deprecated. And again, only a little more than a week later, the team working on WebDriver I/O released version 9 with more capabilities coming to your automations, thanks to WebDriver BiDi. So despite being work in progress and other tools still working on adopting it, like Selenium, solutions based on WebDriver BiDi are already widely available. Selenium, WebDriver I/O, and Puppeteer are all already supporting the new BiDi protocol. Using them, you can automate Firefox, Chrome, and Edge with the same powerful commands. While the Safari team is collaborating on and supporting the standard, the Safari browser for now only supports the former WebDriver standard. Now, let's dive into some examples. Here's how you can create a driver or respectively browser instances in Selenium, WebDriver I/O, and Puppeteer to automate Firefox via the WebDriver BiDi protocol. The same would work with Chrome. Those instances then have access to APIs based on WebDriver BiDi, allowing use cases that were not possible before. Let's look into some. I want to highlight 3 of them. How APIs based on WebDriver BiDi allow to listen for log events, how to intercept requests, and how you can emulate web APIs. The cool thing is, all of these use cases are or will be equally supported in all tools and browsers using WebDriver BiDi, since they rely on the same commands, no matter which version, channel, or environment, and without any patches to your browsers. Now, up to the first example, how to listen for log events. Let's assume the following code snippet. It's checking for web GPU support and rendering a fallback in case it's not supporting it. To make it clear for testers what they are looking at, you emit a console warning in case the fallback is rendered. Wouldn't it be great to have this information available in your automated test as well, without any additional code? As said before, WebDriver BiDi is bidirectional and therefore now allows us to listen for events, such as log messages. This allows us to do something like the following, using Puppeteer. You create a browser instance using the BiDi protocol, and then listen for console events with the familiar .on syntax. Inside your event handler, you then react to the event, like in this case, exiting the test, since we're expecting to test an environment that supports web GPU instead. And it's as simple as that. The next use case in line is request interception. Even after a page has initially loaded, traffic, of course, does not come to a stop. For example, let's assume your app is using an external payment provider. Configuring everything correctly to hit a proper staging payment API instead can be difficult. The good thing is, with WebDriver BiDi, you can now intercept requests and even modify responses in your automations. Here's how this would work in all Chrome, Firefox, and Edge with WebDriver I/O using WebDriver BiDi in version 9, released just last week. It works by creating a new mock, optionally limiting it to a URL wildcard or a certain method like get, post, patch, and so on. And then defining the intended response, totally independent from your production backend or any complex backend mocks. And this brings us to the last example, emulating web APIs. And that's the personal favorite of mine. A while back in my career, me and my team were tasked with implementing the logic for a raffle. The idea was that to participate, people should use their phones to visit a certain website from the coldest physical place possible. And the hope, of course, was that extreme athletes and adventurers would travel to adventurous locations and participate from there, But as you might have guessed, most participants did not, but in fact used location spoofing tools to virtually beam themselves to the coldest locations from the comfort of their home. Well, just as we did during testing, right? However, mocking hardware APIs was difficult back then and can still be today. But WebDriver BiDi makes this a little more convenient. Again, looking at an example from WebDriver IO using its browser emulate API. You need to specify the API you want to emulate, in this case, geolocation. And then similar to the browser mock API, define your intended return value. In this case, we want to test the submission coming from the Mount Everest. The same browser emulate API can also be used to emulate a certain color scheme useful for visual testing. You simply call browser emulate with the keyword color scheme and either light or dark as value. And though on the brink of being phased out by browser vendors, user agent sniffing is still a common practice. So the same API can be used to force a certain user agent even when using another browser. By now, you probably got the API's idea. You simply use the user agent keyword together with the desired value, and off you go. Now, those were just some examples of how WebDriver BiDi already improves testing in tools available today. And the ecosystem is really moving fast, as you've seen earlier, and is enabling additional BiDi-based APIs on a regular basis. I think it's really cool how quickly tools like WebDriver IO, Selenium, SourceLabs, BrowserStack, and Lambda Test have been adopting the standard and build APIs around it. So make sure to check the docs of the tool you're using to see if there is something in your test that could be improved using the new protocol. Now, if you want to learn more about what my team is working on besides WebDriver BiDi, then have a look at our summary at google/chrome-testing-tools. And if you're just getting started with testing or have colleagues that do, I would love you to check out our recent course about testing on web.dev. That's it from my side. Enjoy the rest of today's show, and I hope you keep on testing happily ever after, just like Tommy. Thank you.
It was really amazing listening to you, Matthias, and
Thank you, Matthias.
And would love to know if you could help answer a few questions that I would want to read from the chat. So one of the questions is, how fast can we get BiDi in our hands and make it even more awesome?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, well, I hope my talk brought that across. But as you've seen, BiDi is already landing in a bunch of tools. I mean, in the very own Lambda Test, which is hosting today's conference, it's available since a few months, and there are also docs available that explain to you which features you can use. But you also have seen it landing in other tools like BrowserStack or self-hosted tools like WebDriver IO or Selenium. If you do your test automation stuff around it yourself, then it's also available there already. And well, as mentioned, that's not the end of the story, right? Selenium is currently working on version 5, which doesn't have a specific release date yet, but it will bring increased BiDi support as well. If you look through the open issues and current pull requests for Selenium, you see there's a lot of progress happening in that area as well. So it's already out there, you can already use it. But what we are interested in is if there are any adoption blockers that keep you from using it. So for example, the whole web Bluetooth effort that's currently ongoing to bring that into WebDriver BiDi, that's happening because someone asked for that to be in the standard. There's an actual need for that to be automated, right? And if you know about other features that were not be able to be automated with CDP or WebDriver before, then feel free to engage with the working group in the repositories on GitHub to see if the use case that you have can also be incorporated to BiDi.
Fantastic, Matthias. I think this is great to know this. Another question I would like you to answer is, How does BiDi enhance the collaboration between development and QA teams in an automation process?
To be truly honest, I think there isn't much improvement in that area. The question was design and development?
The development and QA teams.
And QA teams, got it. Well, I think the biggest hurdle still is to motivate developers to write their end-to-end tests on their own and just give them to the QA team for them to execute them. I think that's the biggest challenge and hurdle. I mean, if you want to put the carrot in front of them and say, hey, it's gotten easier with BiDi, there are sure some features, right? So things like request interception, I would say are interesting because that frees the developer from implementing a mock API because they could just implement it in the test, which is a whole lot quicker. So that could be one motivation, but the bare essence of needing to write a test still stays the same despite the protocol.
And I would like to extend to that question. Would the recent, tools like say a Copilot or any other tools could help here?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And also one we get regularly. Well, the thing you were hinting towards is AI, right?
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of developments around that in the testing ecosystem, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware. But I think there are three vectors that you could think of. The first one is probably the one that's most obvious and the one that you've mentioned, using GitHub Copilot or any of the other AI extensions in your IDE to look at your existing code and then let the AI generate a test case for that. I've seen people doing this a lot. And again, I think it's the most obvious use case for AI around testing. However, I think it's somewhat dangerous because only you know the critical parts of your application. The AI might not necessarily know them. So there's a high chance it generates a test case that looks like it tests your stuff, but actually misses the important bits. So you'll always need human intervention to make sure your tests are actually testing your business critical parts of the application.
Yeah.
But there are also other developments in that space, right? The other I'm thinking of is there are a bunch of startups out there who try to create create test cases based on visual detection AI. So they just give a URL to the AI, let it surf your website, take screenshots, and then from a model anticipate certain user paths and generate test cases from there. So basically really let your AI test the website. And if it's on me, I wouldn't really trust them. For me, I think that's too much magic. But well, definitely something that people are currently exploring. And then there's a third interesting use case that I really found fascinating. And that was someone was doing a screen recording of a browser session, right? They were interacting with a website just as usual. And then uploading that screen recording into an AI assistant, which was generating a Puppeteer script based on the text that was recognized from the video. And I think that's a really cool demo because indeed, if you tell a developer, hey, just screen record your manual test and then upload it to somewhere and it will generate the test case for you, that's a whole different story because I think then it's just replicating what a human already did do. And I think that could indeed be helpful.
Fantastic, Matthias. One question, an interesting question is that how does BiDi parse or connect with the browser settings, or is there a way to interact with the browser settings or any parameters with BiDi?
Are there specific settings you have in mind? Well, it's hard for you to tell, right? Because it was an audience question. So I just try to guess.
Yes. So I'll repeat that question. So how does BiDi parse various options and settings within the browser?
So I think there are multiple aspects to the question. If we're thinking about browser profiles, like in Chrome, it's always using a fresh profile. So there aren't any settings that are being moved over. There's no browser history. There are no cookies. It's always a clean slate, a fresh start. And that's true for all the other browsers as well. If I'm thinking about permissions, it's the same thing. You will always need to re-evaluate permissions or give them via flags when starting up the browser. So also nothing carried over. However, there is a planned extension to the BiDi spec to also support permissions, talking about geolocation, screen sharing permissions, whatsoever. And I think those are the browsers. Oh, yeah, there's one more. If you think about things like enabling or disabling browser cache or network throttling in terms of settings or proxy settings, those are also not carried over because, again, they're in the profile. It's always a clean slate. And network throttling specifically for now only supported via CDP, not BiDi. I hope that answers the question somewhat.
Yeah, definitely, indeed.
Good.
So I think there's more questions coming in, which I would definitely share with you, Matthias, after this, and we'll take that. We'll really appreciate if you can answer those as well.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights over BiDi, and it was indeed a
You're very
really,
welcome.
it was indeed for everyone. It was really a learning experience, Matthias.
Thank you. I was happy to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining this insightful session. And I also wanted to remind everyone that these sessions are getting recorded and it are available on the Lambda Test YouTube channel. So you can go back and listen to them again and enjoy them with your peers. Thank you so much again, Matthias, and everyone else. Hope you have a good day.
Thanks all. Bye.